Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Paz. Of course, with me today is a very, very special guest. He's a musician, a singer, a songwriter, but maybe most importantly, a former member of the WCW Creative Booking Committee. He is, of course, the legendary Bob Mould. Bob, welcome to the
Hey
two-man power
John,
trip. How you doing?
doing good. Thank you for having me on the show. Can't wait to chat.
Very cool to kind of have you on. What's going on in your world? Obviously, I know you got a lot of music stuff going on, right? You're back on tour.
Yeah, I am between solo electric tours right now. Just for I guess people who maybe don't know my music history, I started, performing on stages in 1979. My first group was called Husker Du, sort of a hardcore punk band that sort of morphed into an alternative rock band when they came up with that term later in the 80s. And that's where I started music. Then went on to do some solo recordings. Went on to start a group called Sugar in the 90s that was pretty popular. Did a lot of electronic music in the 2000s, a lot of DJ stuff. And over the last decade, have come back to the loud electric rock stuff. I'm constantly putting out new records, constantly touring with bands, and now this year touring what I call solo electric, which is just me and the electric guitar and an amp, and playing some more intimate clubs and small theaters all over the world. I guess this year, just about to start up some dates in the Northeast in May, and then in June be over in the UK, and then back over to the US for some more touring in the fall. So yeah, that's what I do, and that's when I'm doing it.
How is it like kind of getting back out there? I know obviously the pandemic kind of screwed a bunch of things up, but how's it like getting back out there and doing some touring again?
Well, I was able to get out and do some band touring last fall. My rhythm section, John Worster and Jason Narducci, and myself, and we had two crew people, and we did a 15 city tour of North America in September of last year. And I don't know how we did it, but we were able to get all the shows to play as advertised, and did a little bit in October. And now this year, it's a challenge. I mean, a lot of the prior restrictions, proof of vaccination and or masking, in some parts of the country that has disappeared now. So it's a little wild west at the moment, but we're doing what we can do to entertain people and stay healthy and safe. And it's a work in progress. Still trying to be mindful, of COVID, and trying to create as safe an environment as possible for people, seeing as we're indoors and such. But yeah, it's different, but we're trying to carry on as best we can.
When you initially got into like the music business, I mean, we're talking back in the day, were you equally a big of a wrestling fan as you were like into your passion of music, or like how did that kind of weigh against each other?
Oh my gosh, I'm a lifelong wrestling fan, and I guess an erstwhile student of the business. Um, my early recollections of pro wrestling, I grew up in the Adirondacks in upstate New York, very very close to Montreal. So my exposure to wrestling was the promotional wars in the early '70s in Montreal. And I mean, that was an incredible heyday for pro wrestling. The Vachons, Rougeaus, talent coming in from all over the place as those two companies were battling for supremacy in the Montreal market. And also started watching WWF. I guess in the mid '70s when cable started to proliferate around the country. And then, when I moved to the Twin Cities in 1978 to go to college and also to start my first band, Husker Du, I started watching the AWA wrestling, which was based in the Twin Cities. And that's that's the time frame where I started to learn about the business. So yeah, that's I guess my initial journey as a wrestling fan, and then getting to in the Twin Cities, starting to get to know people that worked it for the AWA, and started getting into the business a little bit up there. I guess the interesting overlap between music and wrestling, a couple key things. Back in 82, 83, had friends around the country that were into hardcore punk, but also into pro wrestling. And all of us got together and put out a fanzine called Hardcore Wrestling back in the 80s. And it wasn't like an Observer type or Matt Watch kind of newsletter. It was more of a big fanzine that looked like punk rock, but it was about pro wrestling. So that was one thing that I did early on with friends. And I guess another sort of overlap of note was a fellow, the late Jim Melby, who was a historian and worked for the AWA, worked on the Wrestling Review and Wrestling Monthly as well. Jim was the person who sort of smartened me up to the business and would take me along on spot shows, and I would end up ring announcing the battle royals because Jim would have to referee them. so,
Wow.
so I guess that's how I sort of learned, that a 20-minute Broadway is not always exactly 20 minutes and stuff like that.
That's awesome though. The Jim Melby, obviously a legend, in his own right. But man, I didn't know you had like that kind of a deep history in the business.
Yes, I mean Jim. Yeah, Jim sort of slowly smartened me up. Eventually brought me around to hang out with like Kurt Hennig or Scott Hall, or go out to dinner with Wally Carbo, and sort of get the the look behind the curtain, and early kayfabe, don't talk about it kind of approach. So yeah. And a funny thing is Jim was a very good friend, and he was also he was also a huge music fan, and he worked in music retail, and there was a lot of overlap there. And also my first band, Husker Du, we actually brought Jim Melby out as our tour manager for a couple weeks on a Northeast run. And it was funny because Jim didn't have a driver's license, and typically a tour manager will do a fair amount of the driving, but Jim was he was great company. He even had a gimmick. He was Diamond Jim Melby. He was our tour manager that would go in and settle. He had a little diamond earring. So that was Jim's gimmick when he tour managed Husker Du. And
That's great.
yeah, so we gave Jim we gave him a look at our business from behind the curtain, and he smartened me up to pro wrestling, and he introduced me to different people. And one person Jim introduced me to in 1987 was a fellow named Gary Juster, who I'm sure a lot of your wrestling listeners know.
Oh yeah.
As a longtime Northeast promoter, and then booked a lot of the buildings for WCW. Up until the sale in 2001. So yeah, so that was by knowing Jim led me to Gary, and then from 87 until 99 when I went to WCW. I spent time with a lot of people in the business down there. You know I knew Ole, I knew Kip Fry, I knew Jim Hurd. Yeah, I mean, met Terry Taylor and Kevin Sullivan. I think in that time in the '90s. Met Kevin I think in '91 or '92, and met Terry I think like in '96. So I mean, I knew a lot of and spent a lot of time with Jim Barnett over the years. Talking about the business. And yeah, so I mean, yeah, I guess I had deep history with wrestling before I got the call in the fall of '99.
Did you ever like want to get into the business before then? Like, were you ever? I know, like, were you're kind of in it a little bit, but did you ever say, screw this music thing, I'm going to get into wrestling full time? Was that ever a thought process?
No, I mean, I mean, I was a huge fan, a huge student. Read the sheets. had, a lot of people over the years that, shared so much knowledge, people like Les Thatcher, learned a lot, spending time with Les, people like that. But never thought about letting go of music to take on wrestling. But in 1999, when I got the call, that was during a downtime for me. I had just finished a lot of heavy touring throughout most of the 90s, and I was taking some time away from music. So when I got the call, in September of '99 to be part of the creative team, I jumped right on it because I was I was off the road and between album cycles, I guess is how I would refer to it. So no, I never thought about bagging music, but music was a little bit on hold when I got the call, so it all worked out. The timing was good. So.
How do you get the call, and who do you get the call from?
Well, I got the call from Gary. If my memory serves me right, I think it was right when Eric Bischoff was taking a leave of absence, and I believe that was when Bill Bush, who was more on the financial side, ended up becoming the sort of acting executive vice president of the company. Gary had mentioned me to Bill. He had mentioned me to JJ Dillon. I knew Kevin Sullivan already. And Gary reached out and said, things are in flux. Would you be at all interested in coming in and, trying to help with creative? And I said, "Oh, sure. Let me know where to be and what to bring and what I should do and more importantly, what I shouldn't do."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I got brought into whatever the September pay-per-view was in North Carolina. I can't
Fall
remember.
Brawl.
Fall Brawl. Yep. So I think that was my first show in, and I just sat in the truck for most of the show with Bill Bush, and we were watching, and sitting. And I knew Keith Mitchell as but I knew him before, the fall of '99. So I just went in and sat, and we watched the show and talked about stuff and ideas. And the next day, I think was TV and at the Dean, whatever the UNC Chapel Hill building, I think was. And I think that was the Sting turn that never happened, that never
Yeah.
fully happened.
Yes. Yes.
And I just remember that Nitro. Bill was like, Bill Bush was like, "You got all these great ideas, so let's see how they go down with a few of the guys." So he brings in Hogan.
Oh boy.
So yeah, brother. So he wanted me to pitch something to Hogan that day, and I was like, "Well, how about this and this and this? If we do segment one and this." And I'm in over my head, right? And Hogan's just looking at me like, "Who the hell are you?"
He didn't know you though, like from your musician world. He didn't know you.
No, he did not.
Yeah.
Jimmy Hart did. There were other people that did, but I don't think Hulk did. I think somebody told him after we talked, because he was nice to me for the duration after that. But I think that first sort of here's a cold pitch. Here's what I'd like you to do today. That
Yeah.
did not. Yeah,
To the
that's
biggest star of all time. Yeah.
yeah. So that was what you don't do.
That's great though. Like, would you remember what you pitched him or what you said to him, or no?
Well, it was ostensibly that the Sting turn. So to me, it would be Sting and Luger come down. Sting goes for the cheap heat with the Dean Dome, the Dean dump, blah blah blah. That stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Hogan comes down, tries to issue a challenge. Brett would have his back. And right there was the moment when I was like, I'm in over my head. I shouldn't have said that.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but you live and learn. But things got better after that. But yeah, what a way to get tossed into it. So that was the first day on the job, and then I guess the next day would have been a Thunder taping, and then Wednesday would have been back to Atlanta, and that was how I guess that was the first day in the writing room with everybody that was there at the time.
So is your well, like I guess the idea was you wanted Sting to turn heel. That wasn't like the committee. That was your idea.
No, that was already in place.
Okay.
So my idea was just riffing off of the direction that had already been established, as I was watching the show in the truck. That was the Sting turn was already had already happened. And it was just, my idea was, well, of course, with segment one, we start with that. That's the big story coming out of the pay-per-view. So somebody else had already decided that, but I think Sting, never really warmed up to it. So that was where that one fell flat.
Yeah, that was pretty much, and then Russo ends up coming in, and then like that's the end of Sting as a heel. I remember they had that one video package where it was like it was his plan the whole time, and they orchestrated this whole video package to make it seem like it was an elaborate thing. Then all of a sudden, he was a babyface again.
Yeah, that was all above my pay scale.
I guess you got to check with Stinger if or any really wrestler, right? Especially of
uh,
that ilk. It's like you got to maybe
um,
check with him first if you're going to do that.
yeah, well, that was the direction that was in place when I arrived. So I was like, well, I'm assuming somebody talked to Sting, but
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, all he was. I think Sting was always reluctant to be a heel generally, and rightfully so. But yeah, so there was those two. There was that pay-per-view, there was that Nitro, there was that Thunder, and then the Wednesday was going back to Atlanta and going into the writing room, and I think that was before Vince was there, before Vince Russo arrived. There was like a 3 to 4 week period, if I'm not mistaken, where
Yep.
everything was in flux and nobody knew who was doing what, and it was a confusing time. And I think a little bit of that confusion showed in the product. I think the one thing of note that we were able to do, I think, right before Vince Russo and Ed and Bill showed up and Terry Taylor showed up, was the Brett and Benoit match in Kansas City. That was something that we came up with, and I thought that was a really nice thing that we did, and I think we handled that situation really well. Sort of bringing Harley in and Kansas City and trying to, in Kemper and trying to do the right thing and be respectful, which is important to me always with the business, is to respect the business the way it used to be. So that was that. We did that, and then there was Dusty was there, and then Dusty was gone, and I was like, "Where'd Dusty go?" And they're like, "Oh, he went." And then the next week, Vince and Ed and Bill showed up, and then everything changed. So
What did you think just about like the backstage environment, the politics? You said it was like influx. Like, what did you think getting in there? Like, oh man, I didn't realize the political minefield that I was in, or what was your thought process?
yeah, I mean, I think it's one thing to be a student of the business outside of the business, but when you're in it, it's not. I don't think it's always what people think. At least for me, my experience was similar to sort of like what you said. Like, wow, there's a lot of politics here. Um, I could feel it, I guess, in catering. Um, a little bit. There'd be like cliques all over the cafeteria. As people do in all fields and walks of life. It was just a lot of for me, just a lot of listening, a lot of learning, being respectful, not getting too close to the talent, trying to just stay back. And I think for that period from when I came in until, I think it, it felt to me like, Nash, Sullivan, Dusty, JJ, everybody was just sort of looking at me to see what my aptitude was, what my philosophy was, and what my skill set was. And it was funny when Vince and Ed came in, Russo put me at Gorilla right away. And I was like, oh, so this is Gorilla. So you want me to do this? And I had no experience in that at all.
Yeah.
I knew what it was. I didn't know, I knew what it was called, but I didn't know what you had to do.
Yep.
So that was so anyways, I mean, yeah, Vince and Ed came in, they put me at Gorilla, and it was like, okay, I guess I need to learn this right now on Monday.
Man, that's like throwing you right into the fire, like crazy.
Yeah, and again, when I say skill set and things, I'm pretty good with math. I'm pretty good with numbers. I'm really good with time. I've got a pretty good memory. I've got pretty good attention to detail. This might sound funny. I have pretty good at the time. I had pretty good handwriting. I mean, to do the whiteboard.
Yep.
So I mean, it it was just again. I think they looked at sort of what I could do as opposed to what I couldn't do, and I guess they figured I could handle Gorilla and keep all the details tight. And yeah, it was a little scary, but it actually worked out, and I think I got really good at it really fast. And I would give almost all of that to Keith Mitchell for sort of walking me through that first show live in front of 5 million TV sets. And yeah, it was okay. It was wild though.
What would you call like your position? Like, or did they give you a title?
Creative consultant, but that was my official title. But then, I mean, when I got put at Gorilla, I was sort of like, well, people would be like, what do you do? It's like, well, I'm at Gorilla. I'm on the headset to Keith. We're watching the time code, and I'm cueing the refs. So uh, I think I'm sort of doing Gorilla.
Is that like a nervous feeling? Because I would think like the pressure, like, oh, you can't miss time, and you got to make sure the wrestlers are out on time. Like, are you nervous at that point, or you relax in that position?
I was cool with it. Once I figured out once I figured out exactly what we had to accomplish, it was easy. There would be times when segment 3 would run really long, and I'd be like, hey Vince Russo, we got to drop. We got to, how about dropping this pre-tape? Can we drop this package? We got to make up this time. Like, there's no time built. We got to shave so that we hit the crossover at the right time, stuff like that. Once I saw how it could go wrong, the first couple times it went wrong, I was like, uh-oh. But as soon as I saw it coming, then it was like, I'd just be, Keith, we got to make up a minute somewhere. What do you think? We could drop this. We could drop this. Check with Russo. Check with the agent. Check with whoever the agent is, Taylor or Sullivan or Arn or whoever it was. See if we can get the time back there. So um, once I figured all that stuff out, it was a blast. I mean, it was nerve wracking as hell, but I thought I was pretty good at juggling all that stuff on the run.
When you're doing like that position where you're almost like, wow, I thought I was just a creative consultant. Now they're throwing me into Gorilla. Now I'm doing the timing. Now, you know what I mean? Like, what was your thinking? Like, wow, I'm really like, they have a lot of faith in me. They have a lot of trust. But man, I'm knee deep in the wrestling business, a lot further than I thought I was going to be.
It was just like holding on to a rope,
Oh yeah,
It's sort of like fortunately I had decades of travel and touring and all of that under my belt, so that part, which would crush most humans, was already second nature to me. That idea of, I will get exactly 1 hour of sleep before I leave for the airport,
yep,
and I will function for 22 hours until I can get 2 more hours of sleep before I get on another plane to go do Thunder. And we'll do that again one more night to get to Atlanta for 10 o'clock writing call. That part would break most people. So I already had that advantage. But I mean, I was just there to help. I mean, that at the end of the day, all I wanted to do was help. And if they put me at gorilla and they trusted me with that, then my goal was to be the best I could possibly be at that job. And again, Keith taught me a lot. I think he saw that I could make that stuff up on the fly and make it work. And then once, and I think Vince and Ed saw that I was really good with keeping the show on track, and it just kept going and going. I mean, that then it was just like you're on the treadmill with everybody and you're just running. Yeah. So I never stopped to think about, the implications that a lot was hanging on me. I was just like, this is my job. I'm sitting in this chair for 3 hours and 10 minutes, and then I'm going to go take the world's longest piss as soon as we're off the air. So it's pretty much.
With like you being there, obviously there's some influx. You said like Bischoff just left and Russo and Ed come in. Like, what do you think about them? Obviously, maybe changing creative too many times. Like, do you think like okay, it's got to be like like a Vince McMahon situation where you get the one guy in charge, he's in charge no matter what. Is that better off? Because it seemed like if you have all these creative minds in WCW, it seemed like storylines would go flat or this would end here. Maybe too much politics. It just seemed like it was definitely a whirlwind.
Okay, let me try to find the right words to answer that. Um, I think Russo and Ed came down to recreate, or I think I think they wanted to continue the vibe that they had created, in WWE. Um, I I think history has maybe shown us that Vince McMahon always had the final say over all of the ideas that were generated. I think when Vince and Ed came down, they were looking for, I think they saw maybe a scenario where they weren't going to be edited, or maybe they were told they weren't going to be edited. I don't know. That again, that's above my pay scale. But so I think that it just felt like people were trying to find their footing and find their place. I never doubted for a moment that Vince Russo was going to run the show. Um, I again, he put me at Gorilla, so I was helping him deliver the show that he had written. And my job was to keep it on time and hit our time cues and all that stuff. Philosophically, there are things that Vince and Ed liked to do that I didn't necessarily agree with, but that wasn't my place to lean in too hard. I could try to say, I'm really digging this that we're doing, but can we just get a clean finish before the schmaz starts?
Hmm.
We could still get
Yep.
pop, 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 and then you can do all that stuff, which I think is what AEW is doing. If I'm not mistaken, that sort of looks like their motif right now. So I mean, that was all I could do. Was bring those things up. Of course, from a place of deference because it's Vince's show. But I would try to, could we get some finishes? Do we really want to bring the main event guys out 3 times in the show? Because the second time they're not even getting the pop they got the first time, and the third time they're not even getting over. Like, just stuff like that, like structural things where I thought, he was bringing the big guys out too many times, and I'm sure he had a reason for it. But so I guess that's where I sat with all of it. I was trying to keep his show on track, but there were a couple things where I was like, yeah, I just would ask if there was a better way to get there. Didn't make much headway there. I did the one thing in explaining all of this that goes into how a show's put together. The one thing that I was given a lot of free reign with was the amount of time that each segment would get. If there was a match, if it was, really good solid workers who could put in the time and, put on a great match, I would always try to give them more time. And, Arn Anderson would usually be the agent for those kind of matches, whether it's Benoit or Malenko or, those guys who I really believed in. So, I would always try to give them more time. And that might sound like a small thing, but across a number of months, that extra time does add up. So, that was a way that I felt like I was, beyond working Gorilla, that was a way that I felt like I could have a little bit of an effect on the product, beyond what was written. Is I was the guy that was sort of handing out the time, and taking that and then going back to production side to make sure that we could hit all our cues. And that was where the ability to do math on my feet came in handy.
Pretty like amazing they're giving you or having so much faith in you to be able to do that stuff. And I like your psychology and your philosophy because that's true. It's like the guy shouldn't come out as much. The good workers maybe get a little bit more time. People obviously, if anybody watches the shows, they know like, well, Benoit is really over. Like, he's probably the best wrestler in the company. I mean, really
Yeah.
good stuff. And then even the Bret Hart versus Benoit match, you kind of were saying you had a large part to do with. I mean, I just like the philosophy and the psychology. It's very not, I guess, old school in a sense, but to me, I mean, it's the right school.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty tried and true. I mean, all of the modern bells and whistles that the Attitude Era brought to the product, I think in the right dosage at the right frequencies is wonderful. And one of the things, I know people love to beat Vince Russo up, and there's some people have justification for it, but to be fair to Vince, he had so many ideas. He had ideas for everybody, which traditionally in the business didn't run that way. It'd be the six guys on top, and they're sort of making their own programs, and that's what you get for a couple of years. That in territory days, that was a lot of how Vern would book, or how WWF used to run. So I think it was just like trying to find, for me, it would have been neat to find a balance of having something for everybody, but maybe the younger guys, when you put a gimmick on them and you try to get time for them, to not do it at the expense of your money programs, your main event programs. And I mean, Vince Russo was great at coming up with characters, great with storylines, no doubt about, really wild ideas. And maybe it was just a matter of how many and how often. That would have been I guess where I might not have seen completely eye to eye with him.
Do you think that when like Russo leaves and they bring Nash, I mean Nash is kind of was booking a little before that anyway, before you even got there, but they kind of bring Nash back into the booking. Do you think it's good for like a wrestler to be in charge of the booking, or is that a no no? Is that a bad idea?
There's inevitably going to be a conflict of interest somewhere. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, with my interpretation of it is, when you've got committee, you've got to have a leader who gets the final say. And there, I think there could be benefits to having a top talent be on committee, because it sort of creates a liaison between the committee and the locker room. So I mean, I think that's a benefit. But yeah, I think there's obviously conflict. If you've got talent that's in and they're lobbying for themselves, that might not be the best idea. And I didn't get the sense. I think whenever Kevin Nash was sort of the last word, I don't think he was terribly active at that time. I think when I got there, and Kev was sort of calling the shots before Vince Russo got there, Kevin was not working. He was out of storyline. So that seemed okay. I think the period that you're referring to would be January 2000.
Yes, right.
Uh,
Basically, Russo quits, or actually, was Nash really booking that, or was Sullivan booking then?
that was Sullivan. That was Sullivan and Ed and myself and Bill Banks, Terry Taylor, Tony Schiavone would drop by, Jimmy Hart would drop by, Jim Barnett dropped in once or twice. But I mean, I think it was Kevin Sullivan would be in charge for that period from January till April. That was Sullivan and Ed were writing the shows. Bill was writing the promos, and I was trying to, I was at Gorilla and working with agents and trying to keep an eye on continuity from week to week and trying to keep everything focused for what we were trying to do long term, which was to get Sid up and running and get Sid past Hogan so that when Bill Goldberg was ready, that would be the program when Bill was healed up from the spark plug arm through the window.
Yep.
So, we were trying, and we had a destination that was 6 months away, and a lot of it was trying to keep, trying to help keep everybody on track with that. So that, but that was Sullivan and Ed and Bill and Terry Taylor and myself and Tony Schiavone and Jimmy Hart. Yep.
So Benoit, Eddie, Saturn, Malenko, they all leave. Obviously, I mean, that creates a huge problem. Goldberg, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, he got hurt. Bret Hart got hurt. Jeff Jarrett got hurt. I mean, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of crazy stuff is going on. It was literally like 7 or 8 either injuries or guys leaving all at
Yep.
once. And it was all the top guys. I mean, it was just a really, really bad spot to be in, right? Creatively. Because, I mean, it's like, wow,
Terrible.
those guys leave and then everybody gets hurt.
Terrible. Yeah. So I think in order there was the period where I think Russo and Ed had brought back Jimmy Snuka and people were getting hurt because Jimmy was older and bigger at the time. So anybody he landed on got hurt. There was the incident with Brett and Bill at Starcade, where the misplaced kick and Brett with the concussion. Then the next night wasn't that Salisbury, Maryland Nitro, NWO back together, and that's when Bill had the gimmicked glove and with the spark plug, and it didn't go through the window clean, and then he bowled his way through it and messed up his arm. Then there was the Astrodome vehicular situation where I think Brett, who was working with a concussion, was in a backstage skit where he was supposed to be trying to get away in a rental car, and he hit a patch of black ice in the back of the Astrodome. And that's when I went to JJ Dillon and said, I think I'm going to go home now because this is not the safest environment. And then I was away for a while, and then I got the call that Vince Russo had stepped away and they wanted to know if I would come back. And I thought about it and I said, well, I'll give it another try if you want. And that night that I came back was when we put the belt on Chris Benoit when he went over Sid.
Yep.
And that was a booking meeting. We had to make that show up at the hotel the night before in a conference room. And I remember lobbying very hard for Benoit to go over Sid for the title. And I convinced Sullivan that it was the right thing to do. I said, we got to, this is what we need to do. And that's what we did. And the next night, I think I would have to go back to all my notes, which I don't have with me, but I believe the next night, the two things that we wanted to accomplish on television was we had Chris booked in 3 matches, which was sort of against my normal logic of bringing guys out. But we were going to do a triple threat challenge where it would be 3 matches that Chris would run, like first hour, second hour, third hour. and the third hour match, I think, was a cage with Kurt Hennig, I believe. So we were going to put Chris over 3 guys on TV. In addition, I believe it was Perry and Dean that were getting the tag belts that night, but that was the night that those guys left. So I was not privy to any of the rumors or any of the scuttlebutt that people have talked about, in their desire to leave. All I know is those guys went to Bill Bush and said, we want out. And Bill Bush said, if you don't want to be here, you should go, which I did not think was the right thing. But again, that's not my pay scale. But as you said, yeah, those injuries and those guys up and leaving, and I have been working with those guys, when I got there, working with them on their, Chris, Eddie, Dean, Perry, Ray, Conan, the 6 of them were writing their own programs, and I'd been working with them, and I believed in those guys. And when I found out they were leaving, I was sick to my stomach for days. So
Yeah,
it's like,
not
there
good.
goes everything we tried to do in 1 week. They're gone. Now, what do we do now? And I remember spending a lot of time with Sullivan and JJ, just like, what if? What if we take physical possession of the belt, but we send those guys to New Japan and turn it into a storyline that they've got grievance with the company and they've jumped to New Japan. What if we do that for a couple months and let everybody cool off? I was trying everything, to see if we could salvage it, but it wasn't to be. And, that was the beginning of 3 months. That was a real difficult 3 months with a less than full roster to work with.
Were you still there when Bischoff and Russo come together in April of 2000? They basically changed the whole company. Were you
Nope.
there for that?
Nope. I knew that there was talk of them coming. I knew there was talk of Vince Russo coming back. We were, expecting that, and we're fine with that. When I heard that Bischoff and Russo together were coming back, I could see the writing on the wall, and I gracefully stepped away for good at that point.
Well, pretty smart. But that was basically the last time you were in WCW. So you're only really there for like 6 months?
6, 7 months, yeah. September through whatever that late March show where the late Jerry Two at the Wall was standing, and Hogan was like, "The Wall, I see the wall," and then I went home.
It's funny because, like, I don't know, like you could see the writing on the wall, but apparently Brad Siegel couldn't see the writing on the wall, right? I mean, he's the one that kind of put those two together, but I think everyone was like, how are these two going to coexist, Russo and Bischoff?
Yeah, that was a wild combination, wasn't it?
I mean, I could see it from a mile away. Like, I don't know about this.
Yeah. Again, I think when you mention Brad Siegel and we think about who's actually in charge, I think the footnote for WCW is always who was really in charge. Was the network in charge? Were the wrestling people in charge? Was the production people? Was the production team in charge? No, there was no final stop for anything at any time that I was there. I was part of a creative. I was a creative consultant, part of a committee. I got put at Gorilla. I worked with agents, and ultimately JJ was my boss on paper. So that was who I always went to when there was a question or a decision needed to be made. But yeah, Russo and Bischoff. Wow, what a volatile combination on paper, and I guess in real life.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
Were you surprised to hear, in 2001, obviously March of 2001, that WCW was out of business and that Vince bought it? Was that a shocker to you?
Yep. Total shock. When I left, I turned away from the business. I halfway turned away. I had no interest in trying to hold on or trying to. I went there to help. I did the best I could, and when I left, that was it. I taking that step away, I didn't really stay on top of the product that much. Um, because I was like, well, I did what I could do. But yeah, I was sort of. I mean, I knew that something was going to happen. I just didn't see it happening the way it did. I don't think anybody did. That was a crazy day. For me as a fan at that point, I was like, wow, they just sort of took over the show in the middle of the show.
And it really just, man, killed the business for a long time, to me anyway, because you gotta have, the Burger King, the McDonald's, the Pepsi, the Coke, you gotta have WCW, WWF, just really hurt the business for many, many years, not having competition.
Yeah, yeah, no, and your Pepsi Coke analogy is perfect, and it was one of the things that some of the veterans would talk about is the WCW was always more had a particular style of wrestling that it more of the Southern blood and guts, more action oriented, and then there was the Attitude Era. And it was funny when Vince and Ed came down to Atlanta, there were some of the veterans in the back that were saying, "Mark my words, Vince is going to go back towards pro wrestling now," and that was sort of what he did. It's like when Russo came to Atlanta and it got really out of control, Vince started tempering his stuff down and going with longer matches and he started to walk back towards the old way. And I remember when the veterans would say that, and they were right. That did happen. And then as you say, then well, ECW went into the fold as around the same time as well, and then it was there was as you said, that lack of competition really sort of creates creates that open field for Vince to control the whole business, and Vince McMahon to control the whole business.
Overall, like WCW, did you like working there? Did you not like working there? I mean, obviously you love the wrestling business, but did you actually enjoy working for World Championship Wrestling?
Yeah, I did. It was great. It was beyond my wildest dreams. Again, as a lifelong fan and student and being around the business so much to actually be entrusted with the chair, and I would have never thought that could happen. And once I got there and realized that I could, I might not be the great storyline writer and I might not write a great promo, but if we got to hit the crossover, I'll find a way to hit the crossover, because that's what we had to do. We had to get on, get our hot segment 6 1 minute before Raw came on the air, and that was my priority one every show that we did. A small thing, but really important. And then realizing other things I could do to contribute. I mean, no, I wasn't even sure how that stuff worked. So to learn it and to end up in the chair after 6 weeks was, that's an amazing experience. Totally grateful for it.
And such a fascinating story and a unique story too, because like, okay, he's from the music world, somewhat of a legend there, obviously. But then he's like, okay, he's got wrestling friends, but he comes to WCW, and then they give him, like quote unquote a push, but backstage, it's like they really elevated you backstage too. So, what a fascinating, unique story that pretty much is just true to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think in years after that, different people, Freddie Prinze Jr., different
Yep.
different folks, the business started to open up to other entertainment people that could bring stuff in, and now it seems like it's at least with WWE, it's anything but wrestling people.
Which
Yeah.
is crazy to think. Like, don't you need wrestling people? Yeah, they almost go too far the other way with it.
Yeah, I mean, they've really embraced, they've really embraced social media. They've really embraced outside entertainment talent, and I mean, they have a plan, and they definitely stick to their plan, it seems. I mean, AEW is real close to, you know, I think it's a really good product mix that they have. They're really into clean finishes. Everything seems to make sense, even if on the surface it doesn't at first, which is exactly what pro wrestling is supposed to be. Yes, I mean, there's hope. I mean, I'm a big New Japan guy, so I like good in ring work, and I like sort of the old fashioned booking. I guess the way that Sam Muchnick used to book St. Louis, where everybody goes up and down the card and everything leads to the next show and everything makes sense. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I like. But, I mean, yeah, different products, different mixes.
Do you watch current New Japan? Are you a big fan of Okada?
I he's a great world champion. I mean, I'm a big Shingo guy, big Osprey guy. I think those two together is the best match that anybody can offer right now. I'm glad that they have those two guys, and they always have that match to go to when they need it. I mean, they got us. I like the push that they gave Zack Sabre Jr. recently. He's great hand, and I like this trend recently where people are really getting into technical wrestling. I think the stuff with Moxley and Danielson, Gresham, people like that, that style is back in vogue now after a lot of tables and fluorescent lights that were sort of going back to wrestling. Makes me happy as a longtime fan. So yeah, I mean, I still keep tabs on it. Not as deep into it as I used to be, but I still like to watch good in ring stuff.
That's great because there's some wrestling I see and I think of like it's old school, like FTR kind of mimicking a lot of like Midnight Express or doing
Oh
Bret
yeah,
and Owen stuff. I mean, I love that stuff, but it's funny that that really stuck out. But back in the day, it wouldn't because you were used to all these good wrestlers. It's funny. Now it's not to me anyway. The style I like, there's not as many good wrestlers.
yeah. I think again, to me, like with when my compliment to Vince Russo for having something for everybody, but you have to really pick the time and place for it. I think it's the same with with the new products and the new, how much traditional do you mix in with the with the super modern style, and I guess for me, just as a fan now, it's, I guess, my litmus test is how blatant is the cooperation. That's so
Right. Yes.
that's
Yes.
like when it starts to look like a Buzz Lee Berkeley musical. I'm just sort of like, okay, this is really not professional wrestling. This is like some other form of sports entertainment that requires the utmost of cooperation. So I like it when it's a little more in question. Are they cooperating? Is this as stiff as it looks? Is it safe and stiff? Does the story make sense at the end? I guess that's the kind of stuff that when I look at the products now, I get drawn to the ones that are not fully cooperating all the time, or at least looking, where it looks snugger and a little more believable. I sort of like that kind of wrestling.
As we head towards the finish, we head towards the wind down here. What is just even writing and being creative in WCW and doing the time cues and being on the headsets and even legendary music career, Husker Du, even a little bit of Foo Fighters creating the
Mhm.
Daily Show theme. Like, what's the legacy of Bob Mould? Like, like if somebody said Bob Mould, what's the stamp you're leaving behind? What's your legacy?
What's my legs? I don't know. Just I may have gone the furthest with the least. I always tell people I think I'm a really good storyteller. I think I'm a pretty good songwriter. I think I'm a really good rhythm guitarist. Not a very good lead guitarist. I I got an okay voice, nothing special. I've done a lot with blunt instruments and raw materials. I think it's sort of like if there was a wrestling analogy. I think Paul Heyman was the guy that could get the most out of people with less than a complete skill toolkit.
Yep.
I'm always one that I like to highlight what I could do really well, and I don't like to take on things that I don't do well. So I sort of protect myself in that way, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's yeah, I just hardworking music fan that got to be a musician, and then I was got to have got to have an additional life as a lifelong student of the wrestling business and a big fan, and got to try to improve a product that I worked on for 7 months. It's yeah, sort of cool, good stuff.
So as far as you, obviously, you got the tour going on. Bobmold.com would be a great place for everybody to check out if they want. But please give us all the plugs and, just tell us a little bit more about the tour and everything else you got going on.
Yeah, I think if anybody wants the overview and the history together, go to bobmold.com. If you want sort of as it's happening kind of stuff, you could go Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all three. You could go to Bob Mould Music, BOBMOULD Music. Got a lot of touring this year. I'm up in the Northeast in May. I'm going to be over in the UK for the whole month of June. Got a handful of things with the band in July in the Midwest. And September, October, have some more solo electric touring. The most recent recorded new album is called Blue Hearts. That came out in September 2020 on Merge Records worldwide. And in October of 2020, I was working with a British label called Demon Records. It's part of the BBC, and we put together a 24 CD career retrospective box set titled Distortion. So that's available on Amazon, and all music, of course, across all streaming platforms. Yeah, there lots of stuff.
Awesome. It's good to see you, keeping busy. Any chance of a return to the wrestling business? What do you think?
Uh, I don't know. Maybe a work shoot program with Jim Cornette. I don't know. I love Jim. He's great, but he actually no, scrap all that. I don't want to mess with him.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, definitely not. Hey, maybe Kevin Sullivan, our buddy, he'll give you a call and he'll get something for you. Hey, Bob, I got something for you, brother.
Oh my God, we had Kevin and I had such great times. He was so generous with his wisdom and with his time. I mean, many evenings sitting up, at the end of a booking day, just sitting up all night talking about, whatever it would be, how crazy was Detroit in the 70s with the Sheik, how gifted was the late Bobby Shane, how about, or sitting with JJ and talking about this crazy, loser washes the donkey stuff in Amarillo in the 60s and 70s. I mean, just great experiences with Kevin Sullivan and with JJ Dillon and with all the guys there. I mean, everybody, Kevin Nash, and so sad for Scott Hall's passing. I was close with Scott. We spent a lot of time off the clock together, and he was always so generous to me. And it was a terrible loss this year. So, yeah, I mean, but yeah, just great memories of that time.
Awesome stuff, Bob. Thank you so much for all the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, John, and thanks to all the listeners. And hope to see you at one of the shows or somewhere down the long road.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please help me out and like this video, then click the subscribe and get notifications buttons so you don't miss any of my latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us on Facebook at the Hannibal TV for more live streams and videos. And while you're at it, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the Hannibal TV.